Hey y'all, my name is Ann Wyatt. I started my career in workforce development with the state of Kentucky in 2010. That experience ignited a deep passion for manufacturing within me. I started this show hoping to raise more awareness around the bright outlook manufacturing careers have. Join me as I sit down with some of the manufacturing industry's most successful changemakers and learn how they're partnering people with technology. It's time to give people more meaningful work. This is Workforce 4.0. Hey, y'all, welcome back to another episode of Workforce 4.0. Super excited to have this week's guest with us today, Carlos Del Pozo. He is the founder of Team Engine. It's an exciting new HR platform that promotes the engagement of current employees and also recruitment and retention of employees in not only manufacturing, but other industries as well. Carlos, I'm so excited you could join us today. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Great. I try to keep these introductions super short because I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit more about yourself and your own
Sure.
story and how you got to be a founder of an
hmm
amazing company like Team Engines.
Sure. Yeah, first of all, very excited to be here. Team Engine is a software platform. We do work with a number of manufacturing companies, but we work with other companies in other industries as well to help them recruit, retain, engage, and improve their workforces through software. So, really, industries where the workforce is primarily in the field or on a floor, those are ones that we work with. And typically, we're working with HR managers and HR leadership, but also operational leadership as well.
That's excellent. And I'm recruiting, sometimes I find there's a gap there between those two parties sometimes. Or is it
Oh,
just
yeah.
me? Do you feel that way?
No, I feel that way as well. I both feel that way and I hear that as well. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic because it's the folks who are basically charged with ensuring that a company has the people and the quality of people to get the work done and the people who are getting the work done. And I think it's probably a tension that's healthy in a sense because it's such high impact and important work, but there's probably things that can be done to reduce it as well.
Very much. And I love that you guys work in a broader aspect of industries as well, because I think there's so much overlap in the frontline workforce between industries. So can't wait to dive into that further into the conversation. I got to welcome you in official Workforce 4.0 style.
Mhm.
And I've got to know, as a music lover, what is your go-to karaoke song or your favorite song?
Yeah, go-to karaoke song, I've realized, unfortunately, by making the mistake that choosing my favorite song should not necessarily be like a karaoke song because I tend to like songs that are actually quite lyrically and vocally complex, which I do not have the ability to support. I had to be a little bit more thoughtful about my song choice, but what I'll say is that the song that I tend to choose if it's time to play a song to get pumped up or something like that has to be a song called The Final Countdown by Europe, which
Of
is just the classic pump up 80s hair band option.
Absolutely. That's a classic. That is on everybody's playlist for hype music.
I
Yes?
think they're generationally, I'm not as sure. When I play that song with some folks on my team, they have no idea what they're listening to, and they don't have idea like what kind of a just of body, like total pump up experience they're about to go through. But once they do, they realize.
That's awesome. Is that fun? Do you like introducing that song? And you're like, y'all
I
haven't lived yet. You know what
I
I'm saying?
I do because I think that song also is there's a real experience and like journey that you go through from like the beginning of the song to when like it actually starts going. You have the like bass sound coming in and you have the synthesizer coming in and so it really builds and so you don't really know what's happening as that song starts playing, but then when everything comes together and the drums hit, you've experienced something there's no going back.
It's amazing. It's like at first you're, what is happening? And then you get into it and you're like, this
Exactly.
song rocks,
Yes,
right?
you're like, "Oh, that's what's
Yes.
happening." amazing.
Yes, that is amazing. I love that. I'm a little shocked. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little shocked that
Hmm.
we have arrived at the point where we're introducing that song.
You got to start out strong.
Yeah, but I'm also that's a fun experience.
Yes,
So
that's a
that's
good one.
cool.
Definitely.
That's very cool. Are you typically a music lover? Is that something you're passionate about?
Yeah, I it's always been part of my life, and I've gone through different like stages of it being bigger or like just in the background. But I think like right now it's probably a little bit more in the background for me. If you ask Spotify what my favorite song is, it's gonna tell you it's Let It Go from the Frozen soundtrack
Nice.
because I
Little
have 2 and 4-year-old daughters. But yeah, I go through different phases of what music I like, but I pretty much always have music that I'm listening to.
I love that. Hey, there is nothing wrong with that. Let It Go is an anthem. Okay.
Yeah, no, I've come to appreciate it quite a bit actually. It's a pretty good song.
It's pretty cool. Speaking of things that you're passionate about, I've got to know, and through my conversations with some of your staff at Team Engine, I was like, this is Carlos is going to be an awesome guest on the show because the company itself is so passionate about workforce development. But from
Yeah.
your perspective, why are you so passionate about workforce development?
No. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and if you asked me, I don't know, probably even a few years ago, maybe even this year today, if I'm passionate about workforce development, I probably wouldn't have said, "Oh yeah, that's me." But as I think about it, it comes down to more about like, what goes into that. So to give a little bit of background, I grew up in a family business that both my parents ran, and my dad is a first generation immigrant from Mexico who grew up in East LA, his family cleaning office buildings to make money. And then after school, I was a infantry officer in the army. And so I've just had a lot of experience with seeing like what I would call the transformative potential of organizations and the impact that they can have on the people within them through those experiences. And earlier in my career, I went out and started looking to buy and run my own business, looking at existing businesses, and found in looking at those businesses, which tended to be more blue collar, like field workforce or blue collar type of businesses, that one of the biggest gaps in really understanding the potential of those businesses to grow and succeed came down to just not having confidence that the businesses were going to be able to find and retain the talent and people that they needed. And I think when I had that realization and I thought about my previous experiences and thinking about the people side of organizations, I just saw a big opportunity to have an impact there. It happens to be that it is workforce development, but really I think what it is, it comes down to people transforming businesses and businesses transforming people.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. People transforming businesses and businesses transforming people. That's an awesome takeaway there. Yeah, we preach that. And I'm sure not only in manufacturing, which is the industry that I'm most familiar with, but
Yep.
in other industries as well. It's really, you're seeing this overwhelming call to action with
Yeah.
all industries on the workforce and the frontline workforce and the culture behind your business and how businesses are impacting people's lives.
Yeah. I think that at least what I see is that it seems like industries like manufacturing and others have gone through this journey of going from a dynamic where the workforce was sort of there and you had
Mhm.
the ability to meet the demand for labor with the market. And that is just not the world we live in today. And I think that is only going to become more so the case. And so it's basically a question of what you are a business that sees how important it is to approach your business holistically as a people first business, or if you're going to be a business that just looks at labor as an input into your business. And my bet is that the way of thinking where labor is an input is one that's just going to transition out.
Absolutely. You see kind of stuff like that all the time, or you hear things like that all the time. And I think it goes beyond the argument of, which I'm sure you've heard, of, oh, people just don't want to work. I don't know. So I follow several different groups on social media. And some of the ones that are coming to mind are like the Facebook groups, like the now hiring pages. And there's different geographical locations
Sure.
and all over the country that I follow. And like it's very similar, the types of posts that
Yep.
you see, not from the hiring companies, but like from the frontline workforce.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's very reflective of, I was here and I didn't really feel appreciated.
Hmm.
And so I'm looking for something else. Is that something that you run into as well?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think it's really interesting because hiring for these industries is incredibly local. It's really hard to say, the labor market of the United States is this. This is what it's like. We can do that and we can summarize it, but it just doesn't paint a picture of how the labor market and hiring actually happens in our businesses because every place is different. The labor market for these industries is different within those places. So you take a combination of industry, location, role type, role seniority, all that kind of stuff, and you end up with all these different permutations of different micro labor markets. So it's really hard to generalize, but
Mhm.
I what I do see is that it's really common to find both on the side of the employer as well as on the side of the employee evidence of there being this really suboptimal experience. Employers talking about people who don't want to work, people who don't show up for interviews, ghost in the process, and then leave soon after they're hired. And then you hear about basically the exact same thing, except on the employee side from the employees as well. And so I think that what I run into or how I explain it is that I think people on both sides have been burned. And I think that we can decide either to be, and I know this sounds overly optimistic maybe or just too generous, but you can be choose to be part of the solution or be part of the problem. But I think like really you can choose to be part of the solution, not that you're going to change the market or anything, but you can be part of the solution for yourself. And so the companies that
Mm.
who think that there's nobody out there who wants to work, they're not going to find anybody who wants to work because they're not going to see the importance of engaging with people quickly and moving them through the process quickly, explaining to them why they should work for them, not explaining all the reasons why they may not be a fit. And on the flip side, if folks are looking for jobs and they just expect employers to open their doors for them after they ghost them and their bad behavior will be rewarded, they're also going to end up with bad outcomes. But yeah, at the end of the day, I believe that there are people who want to work. I believe that there are great jobs out there. And I think people just have to put in the work and do the right things, even when they have bad experiences, on the hope that they're going to have a good outcome because they will.
Yeah. We preach, we preach aptitude and attitude all the time.
Hmm.
We as hiring companies, hiring managers, we preach aptitude and attitude all the time.
Yes.
And sometimes, and in some cases, you've got to practice what you preach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the other things that I think is really interesting, and one of the original insights for us in starting the business, is that we looked at recruiting and we came from some folks who had experience more on like the sales and marketing side. And we looked at recruiting and we said, essentially, this is sales and marketing with a different words in the funnel and different outcomes. And
Yes.
if some of the businesses out there looked at their recruiting processes and the
Yes.
standards that they set in those or lack of, and then they looked at their sales processes and
They would die.
compared them, I think they would fall over because they would realize just like that there's just basics that are being not paid attention to. But yeah, no surprise that if you wait 3 days to reach out to a great candidate and you schedule an interview with them, they may not show up, and it's probably because they already have a job.
Because there were 5 to 10 other companies that
Yeah, yeah,
realized this person was in the market
yeah, yeah.
and
It's
called
not
them
just you.
immediately.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not just you. Oh, it's like something that I struggle with
Yeah,
recruiting sometimes. But and yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I try to explain to people about recruiting because we are stuffed into this HR function.
right.
And it is technically an HR function,
Yeah,
but it's not. The
right.
process is nothing like in HR, they don't have any formal training, and
Yeah.
their course load in their degree field is very much like how to handle
Oh, yeah.
conflict resolution,
Oh, yeah.
how to do benefits and
Sure.
research benefits and
Yeah.
compliance.
Yep.
It's not it's how do we do lead gen? How do we
Yeah.
manage our databases better? How do
Sure.
we optimize our sales approach? It's nothing like that.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, and that's where a lot of what we do, how we create value, is a lot of the companies we work with and the people we work with, as I mentioned, and I mentioned HR managers and operations managers. We do also work with a lot of recruiters, but a lot of the HR managers who we work with, they're in the position of being in a company where recruiting is part of their portfolio, and it's a high volume recruiting role because these are industries that tend to have high turnover and or the company is growing. And so just to keep up with that portion of their job is that's a job in and of itself, not only one that they don't have the time for, but it
yeah.
is quite different from their kind of core set of skills and responsibilities. So that's where automation and software can add a lot of value is in automating those key, critical, but manual and repetitive and time consuming activities that are essential to a successful recruiting process.
Yeah, I think technology by and large is here to help us, which is the basis of this show, but
Sure.
HR tech is not excluded from that. And I guess from your point of view and what you've seen with Team Engine and growing that platform, how is HR tech evolving and how are those changes going to impact the lives of the frontline workforce, hopefully for the better?
Yeah. I think it's going to impact the frontline workforce in a very positive way, particularly through HR tech. One of the big things that I see looking at the industries we serve is I think that overall companies have either digitally transformed or like on their way. So they've brought in software, they found opportunities to find efficiency in their operations. I think for the most part, those benefits and those investments have not really translated into benefits or value for the frontline workforce. I think it's really largely the benefits have gone to the office and to folks who are not actually on the floor or on the field. And I think part of that is that the folks who are buying the technology are much more familiar with their own challenges and buying solutions for those. And so they're bound to be have like sort of their priorities in mind, which is very understandable. But I think another reason that is true is I think a lot of investments have been made in technology that were expected to benefit the frontline workforce, but there's like fundamental truths about the way that the frontline workforce accesses technology, works, like what's their day to day, all that kind of stuff that make it difficult for them to actually get the benefit of the technology that's being put in front of them. So, one thing, for example, is that we just see that driving adoption of technology for the frontline workforce, just getting people to use the stuff that you're putting in front of them is a big hurdle. People talk
Mhm.
about adoption generally, and adoption of technology is a challenge in organizations generally and in the office generally. It's an even bigger challenge in in the on the floor and in the field. just because of things like what kind of technology does the workforce have access to? Do you have the ability to help them? Yes, that's
Yep.
exactly what they have. And even there, it's like all different levels of access, data plans, no data plan,
Yep.
text, no text. The device is changing. Maybe folks share a device in the family. And so I just think that there's a lot of ways that the way technology has existed has made that harder to achieve adoption. And I think that one of the things I'm most excited about is the potential for AI to actually eliminate a lot of those obstacles. And the biggest obstacle, in my opinion, is our reliance on interfaces to get the
Oh man.
benefits of technology.
Right?
We're sitting at a computer, all we're doing is like looking at a screen, trying to accomplish whatever we're trying to accomplish on a mobile device that's this big, and we end up with this proliferation of different mobile apps each that we're trying to train people how to use them, how to log into them, how to reset their password when they can't log into them, all this kind of stuff. And so we're introducing this hurdle in front of them to get the benefit of technology, which I believe AI is going to take that away because we won't really need interfaces to actually get the benefit of technology because AI will just allow us to communicate with our devices and our computers in a way that we can't, which forces us to go through a UI or an interface.
Or like the different scrolling through 50 million apps today.
Yeah, rather than
Um,
that and saying like finding my app where I need to go like clock in or clock out or do whatever, you're just gonna say clock in and it's just gonna work. I think we're like a kind of a ways off of that, but that's one of the things I'm most excited about is AI better bridging the gap between people and computers.
that's really cool. That and very interesting. You're actually the first person that I've talked to that has brought up a use case for AI in that way. That's very fun. But I wanted to recap really quickly about something that I think was very powerful that you said and you touched on. That when you're talking to technology companies and you're talking to robotics companies and anyone that is producing a product for automation, they're always more than likely promoting talk to your end user. That's
Mhm.
really where you start when you are implementing
Yep.
this capital investment or whatever. And you brought that up as well, that we should have that same maybe perspective when we're implementing HR tech to the workforce, and for very good reasons. 'Cause it is a very different working environment, and the technology is a little bit more limited.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that just we fall into this trap of focusing on, especially thinking about software, looking and comparing and thinking about features and
Mm,
instead of thinking about functionality and the difference being really like coming down to the feasibility of whatever it is about the software that we want to achieve. And I think it's very understandable because again, that decision and that conversation is often not happening in the context of the workforce. And it's very easy to, accept that it's just or assume it's going to work. But it's unfortunately often not the case. And so I think that's where a lot of technology and software and projects for implementing technology and software falls down in these industries is that it doesn't make the leap from the office to the floor or the field.
yeah, exactly. Some very strong points there. I wanted to circle back really quickly on your own career path and your journey of founding Team Engine. But you mentioned that you were a in the army and you are a
Mhm.
veteran. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I have to know because I just get this very strong inclination from you that the army has probably instilled some leadership skills within you along the way. And I've got to
Mhm.
know, what are some of those leadership skills that you feel like were your biggest takeaways from your time as
Yeah, there's just so many. It's really hard to list them, so I'll just try to call out the kind of the greatest hits. I think one of the first ones has to be just having the experience of working with a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds and places and origin stories, education, careers. That's one of the really cool things about the military, in my opinion, is just like such the cross section of America that you get to interact with. And I think especially being in the infantry, which is one of the biggest components, it may be the biggest, now I say that, of the Army, you really are interacting with people from all over the place. So in my platoon, when I was a platoon leader, which is roughly like 35-ish people, I had people who were from every state, every level of education, every state in the US, I should say also abroad, all people from different previous careers, people who this is their first career. And so I think like having that experience of leading in that environment was not only like educational, but it was also just, it wasn't just educational about how to lead in that environment, but it was educational to me about the fact that I could. So I think that's one of the big takeaways that just runs through everything coming out of that experience is just how many things like you prove to yourself you can do. And I think if I had to call out a second one, I think a lot of people think about the military as being very rigid and hierarchical and therefore predictable, but my a lot of my experience was actually very ambiguous. And so I had the experience of leading in environments that were very ambiguous. One of my first responsibilities after I'd gone through all my training and I joined my unit was I was deployed to an outpost in the middle of this large district, which is like a county in Afghanistan. And I was the most senior American, like on the ground there as a 2-year-old young officer. And I definitely had a chain of command and all of that, but I had a lot that I had to figure out on my own just by virtue of being the person in charge there. And so I also just got a lot of experience figuring out how to figure out stuff and lead in an environment where I really had to figure it out for myself. So that was also a huge advantage and great education that I got in the Army.
I feel like that's the building block to all small business. I feel like
Yes,
it's just kind of like
absolutely.
it's like you're here and then you just jump off a cliff and it's
Yes.
like, okay, figure it out,
Yeah. Yeah,
quickly.
and I think, yeah, it gave me the confidence to do that. It increased my confidence to do that. And it also just gave me a lot of experience in figuring out also what you need to do, what you need to prioritize, how to approach stuff, creative problem solving, all that kind of stuff.
When you first were put in that position, were you intimidated? Was that intimidating for you or were you just like, yes, let's go?
I think I was definitely intimidated. I think I'm much more intimidated today looking back on it. I think I was not intimidated enough about it. But yeah, I was absolutely intimidated, but also I was pretty excited about it at the same time. So that was also an important emotion that I also bring to running a small business. I think is you're definitely intimidated by stuff every day, but there's also a lot that's very exciting.
That's so true. Yeah, I love that and very inspiring as well. So, I guess when we're looking at the future of technology and HR tech and all this cool stuff, the AI,
Hmm.
that's still blowing my mind. What are some of your biggest predictions for the future? When we say we've got this stat out there, right, that there's going to be 2 plus million manufacturing jobs unfilled by 2030. In 2030, which is almost 5 years away for those that
Yeah.
are counting down.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
how do we
Coming up
feel like
quick.
technology is gonna, impact our lives at that point?
Yeah, I so a couple of things that I expect. One is that, yeah, I think this labor shortage is not going away. We're going to need to solve it. I think solving it requires I'm gonna use sort of a non-natural word here, which is multifaceted. I think we need a multifaceted solution that includes not just technology, but also policy, trying to get people back into blue collar work and the trades, thinking about immigration and how the combination of all these different things can help. Because I actually think that the problem is going to be probably worse because, especially thinking from the perspective of manufacturing, I expect, but hope is probably more of it, that we really see a push for reshoring and bringing a lot of manufacturing back to domestically for our economy, but also selfishly thinking about defense and larger policy. I think it's just super essential that we have the ability to produce in this country. And so I think this labor shortage that we have today, which is looking to stay and get worse, is actually going to be even worse than that when you factor all of that in. So I think that AI and technology does have pretty big role to play. I think that it's going to be a solution for a lot of it. It's going to help solve some of it, and there's going to be some of it that just it can't. So that's why we need more than just technology alone. But I think the other piece of this is that I think there's gonna be like a renaissance for the trades and for blue collar work that's gonna come out of all of this. I think that one of the biggest impacts of AI and technology is actually going to level up the professions and the skills and the jobs that are in industries like manufacturing and others. And so I think those are just gonna be like really great jobs to have in the future and maybe some of the most attractive jobs. And in part because on the flip side, I'm actually fairly pessimistic about white collar jobs with AI. I think a lot of quote unquote white collar jobs are going to be much less attractive or fewer relatively because of AI. And so I think I'm hopeful that it's going to be a good time to be in these industries in the front line, and that it's also going to be a good time just to be in these industries generally because demand is going to transform.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up reshoring and automation because I was watching the news, and this is completely ad hoc here, but I was watching the news this morning. And did you see where a lot of the dock workers went on strike, like in the
I
middle of the night?
I know that the strike is happening. I don't know much about the details of it, unfortunately.
It caught my eye sitting there drinking my coffee, and it
Sure.
caught my eye because I saw these signs, which in manufacturing work, I feel like we're pretty much over the automation hump where we're more so like embracing it at this
Right.
point. But I saw the picket line and the signs that were very anti-automation.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, really, this really seems like a pretty laborious job,
Yeah.
and I would totally capitalize on the automation, but
Yeah. Yeah.
that's just me.
Yeah.
Um,
I did know that was something that was like part of their like position, and it is a little bit mind-boggling to me. The only From one perspective, just having such a huge opportunity for automation, which other countries and strategic competitors have very much taken advantage of, is a big worry. So I don't think that's like a winning position to stake out, and I don't think it's really a one that's going to gain any support. But I could be wrong. The My best rationalization of it is it's part of a negotiation package of demands
oh,
that
sure.
can be conceded in exchange for other stuff. Outside of that, I can't understand that being actually a really important thing to stake their position on.
But then on the other side, they were interviewing business owners, and they're already like scrambling, rerouting their product to come in directly from the West Coast because
Right.
it's all down here and up through the Northeast.
Yeah.
So they're already doing that. And of course, everything's going to be more expensive. But we have to
Right.
wonder with inflation and everything, some of the reshoring efforts
Hmm.
that we were all very curious about during COVID,
Yeah.
is this going to spark another conversation
Yeah.
around that?
I hope so. The challenge is that especially thinking about just the labor market specifically and thinking about the dynamic of there's this tension between unions, particularly, and immigration, but then there's also just political stances that are just generally opposed to immigration. And I think it's going to be one of the biggest like challenges that we have to tackle, which is an incredibly unpopular one for anybody to tackle, which makes it really hard to get anybody to tackle it. Unfortunately, I'm worried that it's going to be one of those things that is forced on us to tackle versus us being able to be proactive about it.
And not in a good way. I've thought that for years. Look, immigration is a thing and we have to do something about it. And our employment law is
Yep.
not conducive to
Yep.
embrace that at all. We need our leaders in this country to really step up and do something about it. And have you noticed they just pass the buck around? Have you
Well,
noticed that, or is that just me? It's not my
I hear people saying that.
responsibility.
Maybe I've seen that too. Yeah, I think it's just there's like things like that where it feels like you can't win. Like
Yeah,
people are really against stuff and they're not necessarily for much. And I think this is one of those examples where you're not going to really inspire a whole lot of support for transforming, overhauling the immigration system. You're not going to get a lot of positive support for that. You're going to get a whole lot of very negative support. And so people would rather do other stuff.
but I think it's gonna be a big problem very soon. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the thing that is important, I think, to remember is that the, the solution to a lot of these problems, there's a lot that goes into it. There's not one thing that's going to solve everything. We have to have a portfolio of things that will make an impact. Immigration is one, workforce development is another huge one, technology is one, thinking about infrastructure and logistics and our ability to not be as dependent and if we lose some component of the network. There's a lot that goes into this. And so I think the challenging part is going to get people to have an open mind and think more creatively about the solution as not being like one thing, which they can be very opposed to, but actually being a bunch of stuff.
Yep. It's not one or the other.
Yes.
This is not a two answer choice, multiple choice question.
Yeah. It's going to take a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Very cool. I did not mean to completely sidetrack our conversation with that by any means. I do hope that we continue onshoring conversation moving forward. And I'm hoping that this kind of piques some reinterest in that for sure. But Carlos, I know your time is very valuable. For those that are listening out there today, what's a good way for them to reach out to you or to contact you?
Sure. They can learn about Team Engine by going to our website, Team Engine, TEAMENGINE.io. And a good way to find me is on LinkedIn. Carlos M. Del Pozo is where you can find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Yes. And I will make sure to include Team Engine's website and your LinkedIn profile in the show notes for sure. And for everybody listening, reach out to Carlos if you want to connect or have any questions or be more like me and just philosophize on all of the great world problems.
Yeah, I'm also very open to doing that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carlos. I appreciated you coming on the show today.
Yep. Thanks very much, Ann. Appreciate it.